The spray paint was still wet when I found it. Dad, what does that say? Riley's voice cut through the humid air of the community pool changing room like a knife through my chest. There it was, scrawled in dripping black letters across the concrete wall. Frost. Haven't forgotten how to play hide and seek, have you? My old military call sign. Nobody had used that name in 8 years, not since I'd left the intelligence unit and settled into this sleepy town with Melissa and the kids. My hands clenched into fists as I stared at those words, feeling the familiar weight of dread settling in my stomach. Just some graffiti, sweetheart, I managed, forcing my voice to stay level. Help your sister with her towel. But Riley wasn't buying it. At 9 years old, she had her mother's sharp eyes and my stubborn streak. It says your name, though, the one Uncle Red calls you sometimes. Smart kid. Too smart for her own good. Mia, Melissa's 8-year-old from her previous relationship, was obliviously digging through her swim bag, humming some pop song. At least one of them wasn't picking up on the tension radiating off me like heat from asphalt. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of the message, then herded both girls toward the exit. My mind was already racing through possibilities, none of them good. Someone from my past had found me. Someone who knew exactly which buttons to push. Where's Mom? Riley asked as we walked to my truck. She said she'd pick us up. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls, all from me to Melissa, straight to voicemail every time. Change of plans, I said, buckling Mia into her booster seat. We're taking a detour. The drive to Red Sullivan's security headquarters took 15 minutes through the tree-lined streets of our little town. Red had been my commanding officer back in the day, and when he'd started his private security firm here after retirement, he'd convinced me to follow. Small town, big contracts, he'd said. Plus, nobody shoots at you during staff meetings. And he'd been right about that last part, at least until today. Red's office occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse on the industrial side of town. The building looked unremarkable from the outside, but I knew it was equipped with enough surveillance equipment to make the NSA jealous. Old habits die hard when you've spent 20 years watching your back. Uncle Red! Riley bounded into the reception area ahead of me, her earlier concern forgotten. Red emerged from his office, all 6'4" of him, gray beard neatly trimmed and eyes sharp as ever. Well, if it isn't my favorite troublemaker, he said, scooping Riley into a bear hug. And Miss Mia, too. What brings you kids by? I caught his eye over Riley's head and nodded toward his office. He got the message. Hey girls, Sarah's got some new video games set up in the break room. Why don't you go check them out while your dad and I talk boring grown-up stuff? Sarah, Red's office manager, appeared as if summoned and led the girls away. Red closed his office door behind us and activated the white noise generator he kept on his desk. Paranoid? Maybe? Effective? Absolutely. Talk to me, he said. I showed him the photo. His expression darkened as he read the message. When did you find this? 20 minutes ago. Pool changing room, paint still wet. Someone wanted me to see it fresh. Red leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Any idea who? Working on it. But here's the thing. Melissa's not answering her phone. 3 hours of radio silence. That's not like her. No, it wasn't. Whatever else you could say about my wife, she was glued to her phone like a teenager. She answered texts during movies, took calls during dinner, and checked her social media feeds more often than most people blink. Now I need to use your system, I said. Check the pool's security footage. See if we can get a face on whoever left this love note. Red was already pulling up the surveillance network on his computer. One of the perks of running security for half the businesses in town. Access to a lot of cameras. Pool cameras are decent quality, he said, fingers flying over the keyboard. What time frame? Let's start with this morning. I dropped the girls off at 10:30. The footage was grainy but serviceable. We watched people coming and going from the pool entrance, fast-forwarding through the mundane parade of families, teenagers, and senior citizens doing their morning laps. There, I said, pointing at the screen. 11:15. A figure in a dark hoodie approached the building, head down, face obscured. Average height, average build, nothing distinctive except for the deliberate way they avoided looking at the cameras. Professional, Red observed. Knows where the blind spots are. We followed the figure's progress through multiple camera angles, but they stayed careful, never giving us a clear shot of their face. In and out of the building in less than 10 minutes. Whoever this is, they've done their homework, I said. They know the layout, know the camera positions. Inside knowledge? It was possible. The pool had been built on the site of an old military training facility. Some of the same contractors who'd worked on Red's building had been involved in the renovation. Plenty of opportunities for someone with the right connections to get detailed information. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Enjoying the game so far, Frost? It's just getting started. I showed Red the screen. His jaw tightened. This is escalating fast, he said. You need to consider that Melissa might be… Don't. The word came out sharper than I intended. Don't go there yet. There could be a dozen reasons she's not answering. But even as I said it, I was thinking about the timing, the message at the pool, Melissa's sudden unavailability, the cryptic text. In intelligence work, we had a saying, once is chance, twice is coincidence, 3 times is enemy action. I'm going to check her apartment, I said. Not alone, you're not. Red was already reaching for his jacket. Sarah can watch the girls. The drive to Melissa's place took us through the older part of town, where the houses were smaller and the paint was peeling. She'd moved out 6 months ago, claiming she needed space to think. The thinking had apparently involved a lot of late nights and evasive answers about where she'd been. Her apartment complex was a 3-story brick building that had seen better decades. I'd helped her move in, carried boxes up 2 flights of stairs while she directed traffic and complained about the narrow hallways. Her car wasn't in the parking lot. Could be at work, Red said, but he didn't sound convinced. I tried calling her office. The receptionist at the law firm where she worked as a paralegal told me Melissa had called in sick that morning. First, I was hearing about it. We climbed the stairs to her apartment. I still had a key, officially for emergencies, though the definition of emergency had been getting broader lately. The hallway smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and other people's cooking. I knocked first. No answer. Tried the key. The apartment was empty, but something felt wrong. Melissa was neat to the point of obsession, everything in its place. Magazines arranged just so on the coffee table. Today, things were subtly off. A couch cushion askew. Cabinet doors not quite closed. Drawers pulled out a fraction of an inch too far. Someone's been here, Red said quietly. Recent, too. That coffee mug's still warm. He was right. Steam was still rising from a half-finished cup of coffee on the kitchen counter. Melissa's favorite mug, the one with the law firm's logo that she'd stolen from the office Christmas party. I opened the refrigerator. Milk expiration date was still good. Leftover Chinese food from what looked like yesterday. Normal stuff. Nothing that suggested she'd planned to be away for long. Ethan, Red's voice carried a warning note. He was standing in the bedroom doorway, looking at something I couldn't see. I joined him. The bedroom was in more obvious disarray than the rest of the apartment. Dresser drawers pulled open, contents scattered, closet doors standing wide, hangers empty and on the floor. But it was the bed that made my blood run cold. The comforter was pulled back, sheets twisted like someone had been dragged from sleep. And there, on the white pillowcase, was a small dark stain that looked suspiciously like blood. My phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. She's safe, for now, but the game has rules, Frost. Break them, and she pays the price. I stared at that text message until the words burned into my retinas. Red was already on his radio, calling in favors with local law enforcement. But we both knew how this would play out. Missing person reports require 24 hours unless there's evidence of foul play. A few drops of blood and some disturbed furniture weren't enough to trigger an immediate response. We need to work this ourselves, I said. Red nodded grimly. What do you need? Information. Someone knows where Melissa is, and they're playing games with me. That means this is personal. We drove back to Red's office in silence, my mind cataloging everyone who might have a grudge against me. The list was longer than I cared to admit. 20 years in military intelligence makes you enemies, and not all of them wear uniforms or carry diplomatic passports. The girls were absorbed in video games when we returned. Riley's competitive streak showing as she demolished Mia in some kind of racing game. They looked so normal, so innocent. I wanted to keep it that way. Sarah's going to take you two for ice cream, I announced. My treat. What about Mom? Riley asked, looking up from the screen. Is she meeting us? Mom's handling some work stuff. She'll catch up with us later. The lie tasted bitter, but Riley seemed to accept it. Sarah gathered them up with practiced efficiency, and I made a mental note to give her a raise. assuming I lived long enough to sign the paperwork. Once they were gone, Red and I got down to business. His office had resources that most police departments would envy: facial recognition software, database access that skirted the edges of legality, and a network of contacts that spanned 3 continents. Let's start with the obvious, Red said, pulling up files on his computer. Anyone from the old unit who might have a score to settle? We spent the next hour going through personnel records, mission reports, and incident files. My unit had been involved in some sensitive operations, the kind that didn't make it into official histories. We'd made enemies, but most of them were either dead or locked up in places where they couldn't order takeout, let alone orchestrate elaborate revenge schemes. What about civilian contacts? Red asked. Assets, informants, people who might feel burned? That was a longer list, and a more complicated one. Intelligence work involves a lot of relationships built on mutual benefit and maintained through careful manipulation. When those relationships end, they don't always end cleanly. There's one possibility, I said slowly. Remember Darius King? Red's expression darkened. Your old sergeant? The one who got cashiered for running that gambling ring? That's the one. Last I heard, he'd settled somewhere in the Midwest. Started a gym, kept his head down. You think he's carrying a grudge? Darius King had been a good soldier once, before greed and bad judgment caught up with him. He'd blamed me for his discharge, claimed I'd thrown him under the bus to protect my own career. The truth was more complicated, but Darius had never been interested in complicated truths. Worth checking, I said. He always was fond of mind games. Red's fingers flew over the keyboard. Darius King, age 38, currently residing in... He paused, frowning at the screen. Well, that's interesting. What? According to this, he moved to town 3 months ago. Opened a gym on the south side, near the industrial district. 3 months ago. Right around the time Melissa had started acting strangely, staying out late, being evasive about her whereabouts. Coincidence? In my experience, coincidences were about as common as unicorns. Address? I asked. Red printed out the information. You want backup? Not yet. If Darius is involved, I need to understand the scope of this thing before we go in heavy. He's smart enough to have contingencies. The drive to Darius's gym took me through a part of town I rarely visited. Industrial buildings mixed with auto repair shops and discount stores. The kind of neighborhood where people minded their own business and asked few questions. King's Fitness occupied a converted warehouse, its windows painted black and a simple sign over the entrance. I parked across the street and observed for a few minutes, noting the security cameras and the steady stream of customers going in and out. Through the open front door, I could see weight machines and hear the rhythmic pounding of someone working a heavy bag. Normal gym sounds, normal gym smells of sweat and rubber matting. But something felt off, though I couldn't put my finger on what. I was about to cross the street when my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Frost. The voice was electronically distorted, but I caught familiar cadences underneath the digital manipulation. Enjoying your little investigation? Where is she? Safe, comfortable even. She's quite the conversationalist when she wants to be. My grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? I want to play a game, hide and seek, like we used to in the old days. Remember those training exercises in the mountains? You were always so good at finding people who didn't want to be found. This isn't a training exercise. No, it's much more personal than that. You cost me everything, Frost. My career, my reputation, my future. Now I'm going to cost you something precious. The line went dead. I sat in my truck, staring at the gym across the street, pieces of a puzzle starting to fall into place. Darius had always been theatrical, always enjoyed the psychological aspects of warfare more than the physical ones. This elaborate setup, the mind games, the references to our shared past, it all fit his profile. But something still bothered me. The Darius the first remembered was impulsive, prone to anger and poor decisions. This felt too calculated, too patient. Either he'd developed more self-control in the years since his discharge, or he wasn't working alone. I needed more information before making my next move. I started the truck and drove to the one place in town where information flowed like beer, Murphy's Tavern. Murphy's was the kind of dive bar that every small town has, where the regulars knew each other's life stories, and the bartender served as unofficial therapist, confessor, and gossip clearinghouse. The owner, Skip Murphy, had been pouring drinks and collecting secrets for 30 years. The afternoon crowd was thin, a few retirees nursing beers and watching baseball, a couple of construction workers grabbing lunch. Skip looked up as I entered, his weathered face creasing into a smile. Ethan Foster, as I live and breathe, what brings you to my humble establishment? Information, I said, sliding onto a bar stool, and a beer. Skip pulled a bottle from the cooler and popped the cap. Information's more expensive than beer these days. What kind of information we talking about? The new gym owner, Darius King. What's the word on him? Skip's expression grew thoughtful. Big guy, keeps to himself mostly, pays his bills on time, doesn't cause trouble. Why? Just curious. Any idea who he's been spending time with? Well, now that you mention it, Skip leaned closer, lowering his voice. He's been seen around town with some familiar faces. Your wife, for one. The beer turned to acid in my stomach. Melissa, couple times in the past month. Coffee shop, grocery store. Looked friendly enough. Skip studied my face. You didn't know. I forced my expression to remain neutral. We've been separated. She's free to see whoever she wants. But inside, my mind was racing. Melissa and Darius. How had they met? What was their connection? And how did it tie into his apparent vendetta against me? Anyone else? I asked. Jamie Laird's been sniffing around him too. You know Jamie, Melissa's friend from way back. Always did like the bad boys. Jamie. Melissa's best friend since high school. The one who'd been encouraging her to explore her options during our separation. If Jamie was involved with Darius, that added another layer of complication to an already complex situation. I finished my beer and left a generous tip. Thanks, Skip. Keep this conversation between us? What conversation? Skip winked and turned back to his inventory. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright, too normal for the darkness that was closing around me. I sat in my truck and tried to call Melissa again. Still straight to voicemail. Then I tried Jamie's number. She answered on the second ring. Ethan, what's up? Looking for Melissa. She's not answering her phone. Oh, a pause. I haven't talked to her today. Is everything okay? The hesitation in her voice was subtle, but I'd been trained to pick up on such things. Jamie was lying, or at least not telling the whole truth. If you hear from her, ask her to call me. It's about the girls. Of course. I'll let her know. Another lie. I could hear it in the slight change of pitch, the way her words came just a fraction too quickly. I ended the call and sat thinking. The pattern was becoming clearer. Darius had somehow connected with Melissa and Jamie, using them to get close to me, to learn my routines and vulnerabilities. The question was whether they were willing participants or unwitting pawns. Given what I knew about both women, I suspected it was somewhere in between. My phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. Getting warmer, Frost. But you're still not asking the right questions. I stared at the message, frustration building. What questions should I be asking? What was I missing? Then it hit me. I'd been assuming this was about my past with Darius, about the gambling ring and his discharge. But what if it was about something more recent? What if Melissa's involvement wasn't just a coincidence? I needed to dig deeper into the timeline, figure out exactly when and how these relationships had formed. And I needed to do it fast, before the game escalated further. The sun was starting to set as I drove back to Red's office, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Beautiful and ominous, like blood and water. The real hunt was just beginning. Red was waiting with coffee and bad news when I returned to his office. The girls were asleep on the couch in his break room, exhausted from their ice cream adventure with Sarah. I've been digging into Darius King's recent activities, Red said, sliding a folder across his desk. Bank records, credit card transactions, cell phone data, the picture that's emerging isn't pretty. I opened the folder and scanned the documents. Bank deposits that didn't match the gym's reported revenue. Credit card charges at expensive restaurants and hotels. And most damning of all, phone records showing dozens of calls to two familiar numbers, Melissa's cell phone and Jamie Laird's. The calls started 3 months ago, Red continued, right after he moved to town. But here's the interesting part. The first contact wasn't with Melissa, it was with Jamie. That made sense. Jamie had always been the social one, the connector who knew everyone and loved being in the middle of drama. If Darius had wanted to get close to Melissa, Jamie would have been the logical entry point. There's more, Red said. I pulled surveillance footage from around town, used facial recognition to track his movements. Look at this. He turned his computer screen toward me. A series of photographs showed Darius at various locations around town. The coffee shop where Melissa liked to work, the park where she jogged, the grocery store she frequented. Always at a distance, always watching. He's been stalking her, I said. Or protecting her. The pattern could go either way. I studied the timestamps on the photos. The surveillance had been going on for weeks, systematic and thorough. This wasn't the work of an impulsive ex-soldier looking for revenge. This was something more calculated, more personal. What about today? Any sign of where he might have taken her? Red shook his head. His phone went dark around 10 this morning. No GPS signal, no cell tower pings. Either he turned it off, or he's somewhere with no coverage. That narrowed it down to a handful of locations around town. The old quarry, the abandoned mining sites up in the hills. Maybe some of the more remote farms. Places where someone could hide without being disturbed. I'm going to check the gym, I said. See if I can find any clues about where he might have gone. Not alone, you're not. Red, if he's got Melissa, then you need backup even more. This isn't a solo mission, Frost. You're emotionally compromised, and that makes you dangerous to yourself and everyone around you. He was right, much as I hated to admit it. 20 years of training had taught me the importance of maintaining objectivity, of not letting personal feelings cloud tactical judgment. But this was Melissa we were talking about. The mother of my stepdaughter, the woman I'd shared a bed with for 5 years. Fine, I said. But we do this quietly. No sirens, no cavalry charge. If Darius spooks, Melissa could pay the price. Red nodded and reached for his gear bag. Sarah can watch the girls overnight if needed. I already cleared it with her. The gym was closed when we arrived, its parking lot empty except for a single car, a black sedan with tinted windows that I didn't recognize. Red ran the plates while I studied the building's exterior, looking for signs of recent activity. Rental car, Red reported. Picked up yesterday at the airport, paid for with cash. Someone's expecting company. We approached the building carefully, using shadows and parked cars for cover. The front entrance was locked, but there was a service door on the side that looked promising. Red produced a set of lockpicks from his gear bag, officially for emergency security consultations, though the legality was questionable. The door opened onto a storage room filled with cleaning supplies and exercise equipment. Beyond that, we could see the main workout area, dimly lit by security lighting. The place felt empty, but appearances could be deceiving. We moved through the gym systematically, checking every room, every corner, where someone might be hiding. The office in the back yielded the most interesting discoveries, a desk covered with photographs and documents, all relating to me and my family. Photos of our house, our daily routines, the girls' school and activities, copies of my military service record, employment history, even my divorce papers. Someone had been building a detailed profile of my life, looking for weaknesses and pressure points. Professional work, Red observed, studying the layout. This took time and resources, but it was the map on the wall that made my blood run cold. A detailed topographical survey of the area around town, with several locations marked in red ink. I recognized some of them. The old quarry, where we used to take the girls fishing. The abandoned mine shaft up in the hills. The hunting cabin that belonged to one of Melissa's coworkers. He's got multiple sites prepared, I said. This isn't just about hiding Melissa. He's planning something bigger. Red was examining a laptop computer on the desk. Password protected, but I might be able to crack it. Give me a few minutes. While he worked, I continued searching the office. In the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet, I found something that made my stomach clench. A folder labeled Insurance Policy, containing detailed information about Riley and Mia, their school schedules, after-school activities, even photos taken from a distance. He wasn't just targeting Melissa. He was targeting my entire family. Got it, Red announced. The laptop screen displayed a desktop full of files and folders. Looks like our boy's been busy. We scrolled through the contents. Detailed plans for what he called Operation Payback, complete with timelines, contingencies, and escape routes. The scope was breathtaking and terrifying. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about completely destroying my life, piece by piece. Look at this, Red said, opening a video file. Recorded 2 days ago. The video showed Melissa tied to a chair in what looked like a basement or cellar. She appeared unharmed but frightened, reading from a script that someone was holding off camera. Ethan, if you're watching this, then the game has begun. I'm safe for now, but that could change depending on your choices. Follow the rules, and no one gets hurt. Break them and... She paused, looking at something off-screen. And the consequences will be severe. The video ended abruptly. I replayed it twice, studying every detail of the background, looking for clues about the location. The walls were rough stone, possibly part of an old foundation. There was a small window visible in the upper right corner, but it was too dark outside to see anything useful. The timestamp says this was recorded at the old Hendricks place, Red said, checking the file properties. That's about 20 miles north of town. I knew the property. An old farmhouse that had been abandoned for years after the owner died, and the family couldn't agree on what to do with it. Remote, isolated, and perfect for someone who wanted privacy for questionable activities. Let's go, I said, already heading for the door. Hold on. Red grabbed my arm. We need to think this through. If Darius is expecting you, this could be a trap. It's definitely a trap. But Melissa's still in danger, and waiting isn't going to make the situation better. Red studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but we do this smart. Full tactical approach, no heroics. We gathered our gear and headed for the trucks. The drive to the Hendricks place would take us through some of the most isolated country in the area, winding roads through dense forest with plenty of opportunities for ambush. But as we pulled out of the gym's parking lot, I noticed something that made me slam on the brakes. Fresh tire tracks in the gravel, leading away from the building in the opposite direction from the Hendricks place. He's not there, I said, studying the tracks. This whole setup was misdirection. Red pulled up beside me, rolling down his window. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Darius is smarter than we gave him credit for. He wanted us to find that video, wanted us to waste time chasing shadows while he moves to his real location. But where? I closed my eyes and tried to think like Darius, to anticipate his next move. He'd want somewhere he could control the environment, somewhere with multiple escape routes but also defensible positions, somewhere with personal significance that would maximize the psychological impact. Then it hit me. The old training facility where Red's building now stood. There were still parts of the original complex that hadn't been renovated, underground bunkers and storage areas that most people had forgotten about. He's at your place, I said. The old military tunnels under your building. Red's face went pale. Sarah and the girls. We raced back toward town, breaking every speed limit and running red lights. My phone was buzzing with incoming calls, but I ignored them, focused entirely on getting back before it was too late. The security company's parking lot looked normal when we arrived, but appearances had been deceiving all day. We approached the building carefully, noting that several of the security cameras had been disabled or repositioned. Service entrance, Red whispered, pointing to a door I'd never noticed before. Leads directly to the old tunnel system. We descended into darkness, following a narrow corridor that smelled of damp concrete and decades of neglect. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls, and our footsteps echoed despite our efforts to move quietly. The tunnel branched in several directions, a maze of passages that had once connected various parts of the military facility. Red led the way, his knowledge of the layout guiding us deeper underground. Then we heard voices ahead. Darius's distinctive baritone and a woman's frightened whisper. Melissa. We crept closer, weapons drawn, until we could see into a large chamber that had once been used for storage. Melissa was tied to a chair in the center of the room, looking tired but unharmed. Darius stood nearby, checking his watch and muttering into a radio. Phase 2 is go, he was saying. Target should be arriving any minute. Phase 2. There was more to this than just kidnapping Melissa. I caught Red's eye and pointed to a side passage that would give us a better angle of attack. He nodded and began moving into position. That's when my phone rang, the sound echoing through the chamber like a gunshot. Darius spun toward our hiding spot, a pistol appearing in his hand with practiced ease. Well, well. Right on schedule, Frost. Come on out, both of you. Hands where I can see them. We had no choice. Red and I stepped into the chamber, weapons lowered but ready. Darius smiled, the expression cold and predatory. Welcome to the final round, he said. Let's see how good you really are at this game. Drop the weapons, Darius commanded, his pistol trained on Melissa's head. Kick them over here, nice and easy. I complied, my service pistol sliding across the concrete floor. Red did the same, though I could see him calculating angles, looking for an opening. 20 years of partnership had taught us to think alike in situations like this. Smart choice, Darius said. Now, Let's talk about why we're all here. He looked older than I remembered, harder around the edges. Military bearing was still there, but it had been corrupted by something darker. His eyes held the kind of cold fury that comes from nursing a grudge for years. This is about the gambling ring, I said, trying to keep his attention focused on me instead of Red, who was slowly shifting position. About your discharge, Darius laughed, a sound devoid of humor. You really think this is about money? About some petty corruption charge from 8 years ago? Then what? It's about Maria Santos. The name hit me like a physical blow. Maria Santos, our asset in the Kozlov operation. The informant who'd been feeding us intelligence about arms trafficking through the port of Baltimore. The woman who died because someone had blown her cover. I see you remember, Darius continued. Sweet girl. Had a daughter about Riley's age. They found her body in the harbor 3 days after the operation went sideways. That wasn't on me, I said, though the old guilt was rising in my chest like bile. The leak came from somewhere else. Did it? Because I've had 8 years to investigate, Frost. 8 years to track down every detail of that operation. And you know what I found? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder, thick with documents. Communication logs, financial records, surveillance reports, all pointing to the same conclusion. You sold her out. That's impossible, is it? You were the only one who knew about her daughter's medical condition, the only one who had access to her safe house location. When Kozlov's people came for her, they knew exactly where to look. Red spoke up for the first time. Even if that were true, it doesn't justify this. Let Melissa go. She's not part of whatever happened back then. Oh, but she is, Darius said, his smile returning. You see, I didn't just spend 8 years investigating the Santos operation. I spent time getting to know Frost's new life, his new family. Amazing what people will tell you when they think you're just a friendly guy at the gym. He gestured toward Melissa, who was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Fear, yes, but something else underneath it. Guilt? Melissa's been very helpful, Darius continued. All those late-night conversations, all those heart-to-heart talks about her marriage problems. She painted quite a picture of her cold, distant husband who never talks about his feelings. What did you tell him? I asked Melissa directly. She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I didn't know. I thought he was just being friendly. Someone to talk to. She told me about your nightmares, Darius said. The ones where you wake up screaming Maria's name. She told me about the guilt you carry, the way you drink yourself to sleep some nights. She confirmed everything I already suspected. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Melissa and I had our problems, but I'd never imagined she would share such intimate details with a stranger. Those conversations, those moments of vulnerability, had been weaponized against me. So what's